God bless to you, Coda. Let's see. Something else. Just gonna do. Oh, let's see. All right, let's do this. All right. Well, while we wait for people to come in, all right. Hope everyone's having a great Monday so far. Ba-da-da. Welcome, Elaine. Hope everyone's doing all right. Welcome. Welcome, King Julian. How are you doing? Let's see. Well, thank you for the kindness. Could definitely use a lot more kindness in the world these days. But hey, Joxy, welcome in. I'm doing great. Waiting for first guest to come up. Hey, Holy Gore. I'm probably gonna do trying to figure out what to do while I wait for people to call in. Might work on script for another video. Well, thank you, King Julian. Yeah, I was inspired by a lot of different content creators out there that have been debating theists, and I've actually called into quite a few of them. And something that piqued my interest was just I feel like theism gets a bad rap because there's a lot of very poor faith individuals and individuals who don't know as much as they should coming in to defend their Christian faith. And I figured, hey, I know the faith very well. I figured I'd put my name out there and give it a shot. But what I might do while I wait for people to come in is work on, let me see. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have anything coming up, at least for the rest of the current book, Holy Gore. Mostly because I wanted to make sure I didn't take too much away from the opportunity for other people to lead that if they wanted. But considering a lot of people enjoyed my hosting, I'll probably be a little bit more active in uh, upcoming uh, books that we end up doing. But definitely had a lot of fun with the God chapter from Michael Humer. Thank you for the follow, King Julian, and welcome to everyone that just joined. Let's see. But what I'll probably do is, let me do this. Let's see, get this a little bit smaller. There we go. And what I can do, at least until someone comes up to join, is work on the argument I've been working on for Ian and company. So Christians believe in one God. Depending on who you talk to, Christians will tell you that the Trinity is still one God. You'll have um, different individuals, especially from the Islamic community, and some, I don't know if I want to call them bad faith atheists, but just definitely depending on how they go about it, but they'll accuse Christianity of believing in three gods instead of just one God. Um, you take care of yourself, Joxy. Uh, but but yeah, Christians believe in one God, and they believe that this one God is three persons, as opposed to, for example, you and I, who is one being and one person. Um, we call that a mystery of the faith, and trying to figure out a way to get this so that way it's not covering up my face. Um, have it so that way then the aspect of the mystery of the faith of the Trinity is it is something that one cannot arrive at just on reason alone. It had to have been revealed by God, is the understanding within the Christian community. Um, that isn't to say that it's irrational to hold to the Trinity, but it's just not something that we can know through reason alone. It had to have been revealed to us. That is something I'm also kind of working on in the background to show why it's not irrational to hold to the Trinity, or at least the Trinity doesn't violate logic and reason. And I've got some some progress on there, but I do want to address the concern that it violates the transitive property. Hey, Lizzie, glad you can make it, but let me do this. Thank you for the share. Yeah, that's something that I hope to bring to the table is just like, and I think that's part of uh, the issue is a lot of theists, especially when they come into this type of conversation, is they want to uh, convert the person they're speaking to. I'm not here to convert anyone. I want to explain. I want people to help understand where I'm coming from and not um, be so worked up whether I change your mind or not. Like that's not my job. To kind of use something that stood out to me from scripture in the parable where Jesus talks about the sower that went out to sow. The sower went out and spread the seed everywhere he went. He didn't care about the soil. He didn't care about changing the soil. He just went and spread the seed, the word. Um, and uh, just, you know, the that's what I'm trying to do is just spread the seed where it lands. That's where it lands, and I'll let God handle the rest. But let me do this. So I want to continue working on the argument that, let's see, that I've been presenting. And yeah, Lizzie, we ran out of energy drinks and I needed my caffeine, so Pepsi was the next best choice slash only choice at this point. Let's do this. All right, here we go. Let's see. All right. So I want to continue working on the argument for God that I've been working on. Welcome, Will and Lakovos. Let's see. You got to change it in your account settings, which would mean you need to leave the live for a bit and then come back in. All right. All right. So currently the argument that I'm working on is if nothing exists and then there is no way to move from non-existence to existence, which is supported by if nothing exists, then time does not exist. If time does not exist, then change can't occur. To move from non-existence to existence is a change. Therefore, if nothing existed, then there is no way to move from non-existence to existence. Premise 2, we observe that there are existing things. Therefore, there was never nothing. And then premise 3, if something exists, it either does not depend on anything further for its existence, or if it does depend on something further for its existence. Let me see. Make sure I'm not missing out on any guess. I know normally we have, at least last time that I did, I think I got a notification when guests came in. Uh, Oh, this is just a on my notes, like it's not in a PDF, and it's still a work in progress. Um, and but yeah, so that's something that I'm working on, and being dependent on something else for its existence. Um, it can there's it's meant to be kind of encompassing to multiple different ways that one can understand it. So, for example, I am dependent on my parents existing in order for them to bring me into existence, but I'm also dependent on the existence of space time, because if there wasn't space time, then I couldn't exist as a physical being in space time. So just there's different ways to understand being dependent on something else for its existence. Um, but let me do this. There we go. Okay, looks like I got that. And this. Alrighty. It's working towards that, Locovos. The purpose of this is meant to get to um, uh, there. Let's see. P4 relies on some unnecessary assumption about time. In order for something to not depend on anything further for its existence, it either always existed or it never existed. So the understanding of time that I'm using is time is the measurement of change. Um, so if something um, isn't depending on something else for its existence, then that means it is its own reason for existing. And if that reason is not sufficient to explain its own existence, then it doesn't exist. But if it is sufficient for its own, uh, for it existing, then it does exist. Um, but let's see. Uh, da, da, da. Welcome to everyone that just joined. Let's see. All right, let's see here. But yeah, I'm still working through this. I was thinking on this the other day, and I feel like it can be cleaned up a little bit. But if something exists, it either does not depend on anything further for its existence, or it depends on something further for its existence. Something does not depend. Yeah, I've been told from what I've been seeing that P6 is not intuitive or at least problematic. Since there was never nothing, there has to be at least one existing thing that is not dependent on something further for its existence. And I think, but I think mostly it's people not understanding that what I'm meaning here is, uh, let's see, because I feel like I get to the conclusion that there exists at least one necessary being a little bit earlier here, but I'm not sure where. I would be getting it from. Let me try a new one. P1. Let's see. What was my original P1? Nothing existed. Okay, yeah.
How's
Hey,
it going?
Zach. It's going well. How about you?
Good. Can you hear me well? Is my audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Uh,
So what you working through?
it's something that I've been working on. I've actually got a document that goes through my outline on there that a God exists all the way to why belief in Catholicism is rational. And
Interesting. Yes.
and the it's basically a like a 5 minute read at this point originally. And I'm trying to flesh it out a lot more and hopefully one day um, be a I hope to write it at one point. And yes, Will, but with you having made your account, you might not have the option to join in. Uh, this is to be something where uh, we'll have conversations with people that don't believe that belief in God is rational. It's actually going to be kind of interesting because Zach and I have very, very, very different perspectives on, especially the person of Jesus and who and what he is. But we at least agree that God is rational.
Yeah, I'd be interested to walk through your argument. It seems like a fun time.
Yeah. I've actually got a almost like a live podcast that I did. I got it on my YouTube channel, but I did it with a YouTuber by the name of Kevin Non-Tradicath, and he's an ex-traditional Catholic, and walked through and debated, or more of like just a conversation and pushed areas that he found weak in the aspect. But what I'm trying to do is effect right here is just effectively show that the brute fact can't be a brute contingent fact. It has to be a necessary fact.
So that would like you're trying to uh, attack or not attack, but like combat the idea of an infinite regress, basically.
Not even that. So, and I've actually got a video on my YouTube on the infinite regress. It's the infinite regress is very, very, very often misunderstood. The infinite regress has to do with ontology. Even Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle. Aristotle was one of the first people to kind of put forth an argument on why you can't have an infinite regress, but he himself held to an infinite eternal past. And Thomas Aquinas argued that it is impossible by reason, aka the sciences alone, to demonstrate that there is or is not an infinite eternal past, which is what a lot of people mean by infinite regress. What the is meant by the infinite regress is more often what's referred to by the homunculus fallacy. Um, I don't know if you, which was so funny. I don't know if you saw Unapologetic yesterday, where you had the guy talking about um, when you're looking at the screen, do you kind of feel like that there's a little person inside of you looking through your eyes? And they were joking and referencing the homunculus fallacy, um, which is the reason that you see is because there's a little homunculus inside of you watching what you see on a screen. But then the question is, well, how does that homunculus see? Well, there's another tiny homunculus behind the uh, behind or inside that one, and that homunculus is behind that one, and so on and so forth infinitely. And because of that, the you never actually get to something that is actually seeing what is being seen. That's the infinite regress. It has nothing to do with whether or not the universe itself is eternal or not. And Thomas Aquinas actually formulated his arguments to work, even if the universe itself has an eternal past.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I know there's a lot in the five ways that I don't understand, but I've always heard good things from my friends and other people.
If you're trying to use the five ways to convince a non believer to believe in God, you're going about it wrong. The five ways are more of, hey, here is a good reason to believe in God, as well as more of Thomas Aquinas defining what is meant by God to his students, because this was meant to be a theological textbooks for students of theology. And the way that the universities worked back then was you got your bachelor's degree after you spent time studying philosophy. And then after you got your bachelor's degree and you moved on to your master's and your doctorate, that was when you started exploring theology. So by the time that these students were already getting into theology, they were already familiar with a lot of the philosophical arguments for God. And so what Thomas Aquinas is doing here is he's just summarizing and then defining God to his students for the rest of the book. So it's not meant to prove or demonstrate that there is a God to a non-believer.
Yeah, and the question seemed almost a little contrived sometimes, right? Because it's like when I think of proofs as someone who has a degree in mathematics,
Mhm.
I think of things that can be shown to be absolutely certain from axiomatic premises, and uh, the problem I feel like we run into with like the prove God question is that like the idea of God kind of is its own axiomatic premise. So it's like you're trying to go back and prove something that is a grounding, and it seems to be circular in some sense.
Yeah, so Thomas Aquinas would disagree with you there, but Anselm would very much agree with you. Uh, but the thing is that so and you can kind of see that in the language that Thomas Aquinas uses. So what you and the mathematic industry calls a proof is what Thomas Aquinas would call a demonstration, where you are showing something to be true and it's impossible to be otherwise. Um, and it doesn't necessarily have to go from axiomatic, the a priori or posteriori argumentation. Um, Thomas Aquinas would call it, arguing from causes to their effects or from effects to their causes. He believes that you can only argue towards gods from effects to their causes, which is still harder to demonstrate, but it's still possible to do a demonstration. A proof is a much weaker argument in the sense of like it just shows, hey, here is a valid and plausible interpretation of the data. Um, but it's possible to have another interpretation from it. And what's interesting when you read the way the Summa is structured, um, the question right before he gets into the five ways, Thomas Aquinas asks the question if God's existence can be demonstrated. And he answers yes. Then he says in the very next question, well, how do we prove God? Well, if you were familiar with the Latin and the terminology within the scholastics at that time, that would have been very obvious that, okay, so he's no longer talking about how to show beyond a shadow of doubt that God exists. That's why I say, like, when you really look at the five ways and what Thomas Aquinas intended them to be used for, it's very closer to a uh, here's how we are going to define God as we move through this. because he's writing this to people who already believe in God.
Right. Yeah. Um, if you want to walk through your like postulates and like work through that, maybe we could do that since it looks like nobody's joining up.
Yeah, so let's do this then. Let me get this back up. But yeah, I think I'm gonna rework on this one, but I do like premise one. If nothing existed, then there is no way to move from non-existence to existence. Um, but let me do this. I might need to pick one. So I might need to time is the measurement of change. That might just be P1.
Time is the measurement of change.
Yep.
Okay.
P2.
Wouldn't it
If
be the? I guess that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
If nothing.
If nothing existed, there would be no change to measure.
Okay. Yeah.
And then conclusion. Um, if nothing exists, or actually no, because you don't want an if then to be the conclusion. But it might be. I mean, it might be fine here, but we'll just see how it goes. If nothing existed, time would not exist.
If nothing, then
Because it follows from time is the measurement of change, and if there is no change to measure, then that's the same as saying there is no time. So if nothing
so
existed, time would not exist.
yeah. So basically, you're saying time implies change. If
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing, if nothing, then no change. Uh,
Therefore,
Therefore,
if
if
nothing, no time. Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah, I think that works.
And P3, to move from non-existence to existence is a change.
To prove from non-existence to existence is a change. Yeah, yeah.
C2. So following from the first conclusion to premise 3, um, if nothing existed, nothing could exist. Or nothing would ever exist.
Because there's no time to change to something.
Yep.
Okay. What up, Rain?
All right. And then P4, we observe things existing, which this leads, I don't know if this would be a conclusion, but that just means that this is just a rough. We observe things existing, therefore nothing. There was never nothing. Let's see. So change. So Will says he's contesting P3. So change here is understood as a difference. So if there is a difference between not existing and existing, then there's a change between those two states. So that's really all it's saying. It's uh, like I'm not sure what the exact contention would be in there, but
To move from non-existence to existence is a change. Yeah, I think it would just be that wouldn't be consistent with at least the physical laws of nature we observe as well, right? Because you never observe a creation of energy or sure you can observe a creation of matter, but there has to at least be energy there. So
right.
it would be
So so this is the philosophical nothing. Um, so the ontological nothing. So not like the emptiness of space and nothing. Um,
yeah, exactly.
so um, this also isn't necessarily like even the like you were talking about like the energy to matter or um, the different like the rearrangement of your atoms to create you from before you existed as an individual to you existing as an individual. That's still a change, even if it's not the true non-existence, nothing that's being talked about here. So if that in and of itself, that rearrangement is, we would call it change, then I'm not sure how I would see the contention with the true nothingness. Um, the the way that I like to argue towards God is let us first establish the need of something necessarily existing. We don't need to know what it is. It could very well be the universe at this point for all I care. But let us first establish that there has to be something whose non existence is an impossibility. Once we've established that, we can then look at its nature to determine why its non existence is an impossibility. And then once we've established that, we can continue moving on to exploring the different religious beliefs out there to see which one actually follows this thing, if any of them do, and even if this being interacted with history. Um, and as far as like there's, as Will was saying, is that there's nothing to measure against. That's kind of what nothing is. Like the actual, there's nothing measurable there. Like Heidegger, famous, I guess infamously, points out that nothing isn't just the absence of a thing, because even the absence of a thing is pointing to the thing that it's absent of. So, like, true metaphysical nothingness is quote unquote more than just the absence of things. It's something we can't even talk about because our very attempt at talking about it leads to us contradicting ourselves because now we're talking about a thing.
Yeah,
Nothing
you can't
is,
really it from our perspective it's not really something that we can really even like symbolically talk about
yeah.
coherently.
Mm-hmm. All right. So there was never nothing. P5. If there was never nothing, there always had to be at least, I don't know if I want to do one thing or something. Let's do one thing and see how that goes. There always had to be at least one thing. There was
What do you
never
mean by
nothing.
one thing here?
Like it could be like the at least is the deciding factor. So like it could be, and that's kind of like what I was talking about. I'm trying to keep the exact aspects of it somewhat vague, where it could be applicable to just about anything. Um, the idea behind it is I am uh, just try, like I said, trying to show that it's not a brute contingency.
You might be better off just saying something then, because that's more evocative of the like traditional language. There exists some X in X, or so something's probably better there. There exists something.
And then because there was never nothing, there was always something. Um, from C conclusion from C3 was never nothing, therefore was always something. And then actually I like that. It doesn't get us quite to the necessary versus brute contingency yet, but I like that. There was always something.
Even saying to move from non-existence to existence seems to presume more than
Mm-hmm.
philosophical nothing. Uh, well,
It's
non-existence is just the.
that's kind of the point of this argument is that this is trying to show that true philosophical nothingness is an impossibility, and a kind of like almost like a like to um, that's really all this is doing. It's not saying that there is such a thing as the philosophical nothing. It's just trying to show that the true philosophical nothing is impossible.
And see, I don't know if many like atheists or many people who think that God is irrational will disagree with this point either. I
Yeah.
feel like this idea is like, just if we consider conservation of energy, consider scientific principles, the
Hmm.
idea that nothing ever existed, I don't think is something that's supported in scientific
Hmm.
communities.
Yeah. Like even like the Big Bang Theory, like it doesn't tell anyone about if the universe had a beginning or not. It's just we went from hot dense state to the expansion of the universe. Um, and just yeah, it was, whether or not it's an infinite eternal past with multiple bounces, a multiverse, or heat death to another new expansion. Like there's so many different, almost like infinite models of the universe that's accepted within the scientific community. That yeah, like um,
Raul, you're welcome to request up.
yep. The reason for it, Will, is from premise the first uh, thing. Time is the measurement of change. So if you went from not having anything to having something, um, then it is a change. But if there is no time to measure that change, then change can't occur. And Rawl, that's actually what this argument that we're Zach and I are working through is attempting to show is that there has to at least be one thing, at least one thing. It could be many things, but there has to at least be one thing that doesn't come from anything. Even if it's the universe itself that exists necessarily, that it's impossible for it to not exist. So the first step of the argument that at least I'm working through that Zach's helping me out with um, is that uh, there has to at least be something that is impossible to not exist. And I am perfectly okay at that point in the argument to concede that it very well could be the universe. The next step of the argument is to determine, all right, what enables something to necessarily exist, for it to not exist. Um, and that's when we would then explore what enables a thing to have that capability, and then we compare it to our contenders. And if the universe fits that, great. If not, then we have to keep looking. Um, and yeah, King Julian, you got it right on the nose. Like, God always was and will be. He is that necessary thing. He doesn't. He doesn't not exist. So he doesn't come into being. He. Um, so yeah, and you know, the first law of thermodynamics. That's perfectly fine. Like, that's energy. The situation. Like, again, we're not at the point of God yet. We're exploring even further past God at this point. Like, we haven't even gotten to the God question um, in the situation. And will if you just made your account today, you might not be able to do it. Thanks, Connie. You might not be able to join, but there should be. I think it's like a blue and pink person. But let me see if I can invite you up.
Yeah, if anyone wants to join, there is there's two people next to each other, and you can click on it, and there's usually a
There
way
we
to
go.
join up from that.
I sent you an invite, Will. But, but yeah, I think because like I was saying, at this point, I am like people like especially people who don't know me very well, they get very annoyed with the way that I argue for God because I work very, very slow and I go way further back at some point. Um, that's actually Eustace, that's actually what this argument is trying to disprove. C2 is showing that based on our previous statements, time is the measurement of change. If nothing existed, there would be no change to measure. If nothing existed, time would not exist. So these are if-then statements. It's not presuming anything yet. It is just saying if it is true that nothing existed, then time would not exist. However, because time to move from non-existence to existence is a change, and time doesn't exist if there is nothing, that means that if nothing existed, nothing would ever exist. But because we observe things that are existing, we know that it's not the case that nothing existed. But yeah, like I was saying, I work very slowly and I start further back than I think most people usually tend to start. And I think that annoys a lot of people because they want to get straight to the juicy stuff, like the resurrection arguments or the omni traits of God, things like that. I am very familiar with King Julian. I'm very familiar with Greek mythology, and I'm a little familiar with some Egyptian mythology. Um, if that's what you're asking. And I've got like surface level understanding of some other mythology, but not enough where I would be confident to say that I know them. Let's see. There was always something. But now that we've established that there's always something, now we need to show whether brute contingencies are possible or not. So definitions. being something that exists. Or requires something external for it to exist.
So one argument I've been thinking of for this point is an argument by I don't know if it's technically a contrapositive argument, but basically it's this idea that right, people will say that if someone tries to say that a belief in God is irrational, right, then they would have to have some other grounding beliefs, like you have some other grounding beliefs that say you want to believe in an infinite regress, right? Well, an infinite regress can also not be inductively confirmed, right? There's no way to go back and scientifically show the beginning of an infinite regress because there will always be something before that. And so it seems to me that some positions on this matter will make themselves inert, right? Because if you say that God is irrational, then you are at the same time contending that the idea that the universe is a necessary grounding, like the universe itself is necessarily grounding, then you are almost making that position also irrational by the same logic, because you can't show that that is a rational position. So either I think the only logically consistent belief sets are either going to be that either the universe and God are both rational justifications for a first grounding, or neither of them are rational, and you shouldn't talk about it at all to begin with. But then that latter option runs into other problems of well, if we can't use deduction, then how can we? There's a lot of knowledge that gets thrown out the window, like mathematics, for example.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to attempt to do is and I don't mean this in a rude way or anything like that, is it almost feels like to me that the brute contingency is the result of someone who did the work to get to there needs to be a necessary existing thing, but they just don't want to call it a necessary thing or explore that. So let's see, we got someone requesting to join, but yeah, exploring what enables it to be a brute thing, and they don't want to give it the name of necessary. I don't know, I feel like that's something that isn't explored a lot in the conversation. But welcome, I LARP when bored. Just for TikTok purposes, are you over the age of 18?
Yeah.
All right. And then, do you agree or disagree with the prompt?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think I think I'm an internalist in epistemology, so I think you can probably be rational in your belief in God. But
Okay.
I wanted to know how you would respond to. Are you familiar with the aloneness argument against classical theism? Or?
I've heard that name before, and I think I've heard the actual argument, but I've only recently have heard of it. Go ahead and refresh my memory on it.
Is that the same thing as the argument from hiddenness, or is that
No.
Okay.
It's basically, I can give it to you informally, but if you want it formally, he has it formalized in the paper.
Yeah, whichever is more comfortable for you. If you're more comfortable with it informally, go for it.
It's basically saying if it's possible that God can exist in a possible world without anything contingent in the world,
Mm-hmm.
He would know the proposition that he exists alone wholly intrinsically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he would his knowledge, everything in God would be God, given divine simplicity, and so his knowledge would be wholly intrinsic, but he would necessarily know that contingent fact, right? But whatever
Mm-hmm.
is wholly intrinsic and contingent is an accident. But divine simplicity states it's impossible for God to have any accidents. Therefore, there's a contradiction until.
Yeah. Gotcha. So the argument is effectively saying because of God's omniscience, um, if it is the case that because of the fact that God freely created the universe, God could have not created the universe, and because of that, God could have had knowledge that his that there was a universe, or he could have not had knowledge of creating the universe, and because of that it's possible for God to have been different, but because there's no way for God as a divinely simple being to have that difference, um, there's a contradiction in the classical understanding.
Well, it's
The
just
way
saying
that
he
I
would
go
it's
ahead.
just saying that in the world to which
Hmm.
he exists alone, his knowledge is not extrinsic. There's nothing relational towards that which his knowledge can point to, which is why
Yeah.
it would be wholly intrinsic. But if it's wholly intrinsic, the proposition that he exists alone would be contingent. So he would know it. He would know that contingent proposition wholly intrinsically.
Hmm.
Necessarily, he would know it too, and that's the contradiction.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. One, when you look at like the way that Thomas Aquinas describes creation and everything else like that, um, it's not actually the case that God existed alone. While the universe has a beginning, a first moment, if you understand like the theory of time, um, the understanding would be that the universe could eternally, in one sense, always exist alongside with God, but still had a first and a last moment. Um, and so the argument doesn't like when you actually apply it to the way that Thomas Aquinas would describe it. I'm not sure if it's as strong as people initially think. It's definitely a lot stronger against like the way that Leibniz describes it with like the possible worlds and things like that. Um,
Yeah,
now, as
the principle of sufficient reason. Uh, yeah, and it is interesting too, because if you go with like the most classical theistic framework, like something Aristotelian, like God is
mhm,
that which acts on all potentialities, so there's actuality acting on any potential cause, then it could just be the case that God existing alone just wasn't a possible uh, reality to be instantiated.
yeah.
Uh, then again, like I don't know how much that
Well,
uh,
I mean, I can give
works
you a little
within.
pushback really quick.
Yep.
Well, the other thing that, like, before you get too deep into it, the other thing is a lot of people, including Catholics, who um, even have like a surface level understanding of Thomas Aquinas. They misunderstand what divine simplicity means and what the omniscience is. So the analogy that I like to use is it's almost like a benevolent cosmic horror. The if you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft and the way that he describes the cosmic entities, is they are so vast, they are so far beyond the comprehension of the human observer that when they're trying to explain what it was that they saw, words fail them, and they just do the best to describe this thing that they absolutely cannot explain. Um, when you look at Aristotle's arguments or description on how we come to know things, we come to know things either by breaking it down into its smaller parts or by adding things onto it. For God, because he is divinely simple, we can't break him down into further parts. But to add things onto him, we are now creating a thing and calling it God when that isn't what God actually is. It's why Thomas Aquinas and a lot of the classical theists would say that the only way to talk about God is via negation. We can only talk about what God is not. Because to say God is blank, we are now taking what God is, which is just is, and then adding something to it, which you can't do in the classical understanding of God. So the
Well, if
idea
you're
of like God's,
apophatus,
what was it?
if you're apophatus, I can give you some critiques for that position.
Go ahead.
To its logical conclusion, you can't say God is a Trinity because that's a cataphatic trait attributed to God.
So a person isn't an attribute. So the aspect of the divine simplicity has to do with the essence, the whatness of the thing. And the argument as far as like the Trinity has to do with it possibly violating the law of the transitive property.
No,
But
that's not. I'm not making. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm not making the logical problem of the Trinity. I'm saying like, okay, to its logical conclusion, like as like there's a paper. It's called "Speaking of an Ineffable God: Apophaticism Explained," and the people that write that paper literally die on the hill that you can't say. You can't say anything about God. Like they hold this like really strong Neoplatonic model, to which that model excludes you from describing God in any sense. And presumably the Trinity is a description of God. And if a person's going like that far, you can't like say he's a Trinity. It's not just the essence; it's anything about him.
Yeah, and well, the thing is that that's not how Thomas Aquinas, which is the school that I closely relate to, would describe it. Like he's not that strict. When he talks
Okay,
like,
that's fine.
because
Yeah.
he talks about like you can know that God is, you can know that. That's a positive statement. But what you can't do is, and you can even know that his essence is, like that, as he talks about, like that God's essence is existence. We can know that. But anything beyond that, those two positive statements, is to then add on to the essence of God. That is what the divine simplicity is talking about. And to get back to what I was saying, so when Aquinas and other classical thinkers are saying that God is omniscient, that's a positive statement, which we can't do. And so what we're doing is we're speaking via analogy. And at that point, what we are explaining is kind of similar to the characters in Lovecraft stories, where we have an experience or observation of something that we absolutely can't explain. But it appears to us that God has something that we might call knowledge. He doesn't have our knowledge or what we experience as knowledge, but it seems similar. So we're going to call the singular essence of God having omniscience because it seems as if he does have knowledge. But that's not a literal attribute, something that God actually possesses, because that's the uh, where the analogy comes in. So the critique as far as like, well, God's contingent knowledge, like, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. Like the thing of the knowledge aspect of it is that because God is the source of all reality, his omniscience is more of just the fact that he's the source of it. All of the omni traits are descriptions on how God relates to his creation as the source of it all creation. Um,
Yeah, so you just
and
take the view that like God doesn't literally have knowledge. It's just like it's like a useful fiction that we can describe to God analogously. Or
I don't know if I would say fiction because it's still proper to say that God has knowledge, but it's an equivocation because we are using and describing human knowledge, and God's knowledge is not human knowledge.
okay, well that's fine. Well, I have to get out here anyways. But you take it easy. I was good talking to
You too.
you.
I would much rather hyper nerds doing stuff like this than people who don't know what they're talking about.
It's true. Everybody who I feel like has meaningful things to add on to this conversation are typically pretty nerdy.
Hmm.
But I digress. So I think it almost seems like his criticism was like for a uh, well, as, particularly when he was talking about apophatism. It seems like his critique was more for like a prescriptive
Hmm.
understanding of God, which to people in the chat, I think it's very important to understand that like any work in theology is like descriptive. It's not like someone is saying something and that is um, uh, available outside of context. There's context that it's understood within, and so it's a description onto something. We're trying to understand this greater whole that you can understand parts, but it's like if you were trying to look at the Earth from outer space, but you could only zoom into like specific parts, like if you could only see the borders of Florida or something, trying to understand the entirety of the Earth, but even
Hmm.
bigger than the Earth, like if you were trying to understand the entirety of the universe just by looking at little glimpses of the Earth.
Yeah,
I think that's a good analogy there.
it's. I almost like to use Nietzsche's "When you stare into the abyss looks back." If you
Yeah,
are super zoomed in on the infinite, what does the infinite look like? An empty abyss. And
yeah,
God is the
that's true.
abyss that stares back. It is a complete misrepresentation of his quote, uh, but I still like it.
Yeah, it's a good one. Let's see. Um, what are you up to? I'm just doing some math right now, actually, myself.
Well, I'm still gonna work uh, on the argument. Let me get that pulled back up. Um,
Yeah, we could keep going through that and try and formalize it a bit more.
all right. So I've got, all right. So definition, being something that exists, dependent, uh, contingent, or requires something external for it to exist, independent, necessary, or does not require something external for it to exist. So then P1, if there was always something, it was either dependent or independent. P2.
And by dependent, independent, is that just using like a synonymous language for contingent or necessary, or is
Yeah, the reason
okay?
I have gotten in the habit of trying to avoid using the phrase contingent or necessary because when I use contingent or necessary, I tend to use the classical ontological meaning of the terms. But due to the popularity of model logic, it's people hear contingent and necessary and they think something different than what I'm trying to convey. So I'm trying to avoid using that language. But yes,
Gotcha.
uh, let's see. The trilemma is either everything is dependent, everything is independent, or there is a mixture.
Is that basically Agrippa's trilemma right there, or?
No, this is saying that, so from P1, if there was always something, which is the conclusion of the previous argument, then that something was either dependent or independent.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to use trilemma here, but basically the idea is that the three possibilities are either everything is dependent, everything is independent, or there's a mixture. P3, we observe some dependent beings, and being here is, if for the chat, just something that exists. It does not imply personhood or anything like that. We observe dependent beings. Conclusion. Not everything is independent. P4. If a person, so we'll just answer your question, a person has being, the person exists because it has being. But a rock also has being. So like just the very fact, like the way that I understood it when I was going through my studies is being is the gerund of the verb to be. So if something exists, which is I am, it is, or anything like that, then it has being, which is the noun of the verb being. Looks like we got another guess. Oh, looks like they just left, or are they still here? The Trinity is three persons that have the same being, which is why people say it is a violation of the property of, let me try this, because my Windows, there we go. Welcome, Mother of Dragons.
Thanks for bringing me up. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good, good.
And then just for TikTok purposes, are you over the age of 18?
Oh, yes.
All right. So what brings you up?
Yeah, interesting prompt. Belief in God is rational. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would call it that, but I would
Okay.
call it a belief, right?
Yep.
And belief, by definition, right, is believing in something without evidence.
Well, certainly there are some beliefs that are less rational than others, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I were to believe, say, that there is a flying spaghetti monster that controls the universe, right? I think we could agree that like that would be an irrational thing to believe in. So I think we could agree that there are some beliefs that are more rational than others.
Yep. So like belief in and of itself is not equivalent to being irrational. There's one of the most common understandings of knowledge, which you and I would both agree, I would assume, is knowledge. Having knowledge is a rational thing, right?
So so let's go to, I'm just going to grab my database here, right? Because words, oops, sorry for my barking dogs back here.
You're good.
I'm going to mute for a second. I'll come back. Let me just calm them down.
Yeah, so right here we're looking at basically it's basically just an analytical evaluation of the epistemology in which God is the grounding for the universe. And right, our argument is that the idea that the idea of some theistic framework is as rational as the alternative atheistic framework, and that's the
both
basic
can be
argument that we're
rational.
making here.
And just to be clear, both can be rational. Just because it's rational to believe in God does not mean it is irrational to not believe in God. It is possible to have two conflicting views and both of them be rational.
It's also true.
You guys, I'm back. Sorry.
You're okay.
That's okay. So, yeah, so let's define rational, right? Rational means based on logic, right?
Yep.
Based on logic, reason, or clear thought rather than emotions, often described as sensible, reasonable, or sane, right? And then let's define faith, right? Faith is
we didn't say
believing
faith.
in something.
We didn't say faith.
You did before, yeah. Oh, okay, you're using belief. Okay, so yeah, let's go by belief. Let's define belief. Listen, my dog see a squirrel, man. I'm sorry.
You're good.
Oh, good.
Hey, Charlie. I'm gonna mute again. Sorry. Okay, so let's define belief. A mental state or attitude accepting something as true, valid, or real without absolute proof.
What would you mean by absolute truth in this
Proof,
instance?
I think, is the term. Absolute, without absolute
Oh,
proof.
absolute proof. I thought I heard absolute truth. Okay.
Yeah.
So we do not have absolute proof on the universe having a beginning or not. There are people in the scientific community who hold that the universe did have a beginning, and there's also people in the scientific community who think that the universe has an eternal and infinite past. There's also people in the scientific community who hold to a multiverse. There's so many different models within the scientific community where there isn't an absolute proof one way or towards another. So would you say that a scientist who holds that, based on the evidence that he has available to him, holds to the view that there is an infinite eternal past, would you say that they are being rational?
Okay, so wait, so you just went to another subject, right? You're saying a belief in a deity is rational, but now you're going to the universe?
Well, no, what I'm trying to do is you were saying that you had come up saying, belief is always irrational. Based on the
I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that.
So which, in your estimation, which beliefs count as rational and which ones count as irrational?
Yeah, so belief, that's why I wanted to define belief, right? belief is believing in something without proof, right?
Not on the
And
definition
we
you just gave.
define, yeah.
It
Well,
said
are
with.
we in agreement? Yeah, so are we in agreement? That's why words are important and
So where
definitions are
in
important.
the definition did it say without proof? Because not having absolute proof is not the same as not
Uh-huh.
having proof. That's why I was using the science example, because those are scientists who don't have absolute proof, but they do have evidence. They do have reasons to hold the conclusions that they do. It's not based on
Correct.
emotions. It's not based on, but it's based on logic and the available evidence that they do have.
Right, it
Uh,
follows the rigors of,
mhm. But they also
yeah,
disagree
it
with each
follows the
other.
rigors of, yeah, they follow the rigors of science
Hmm.
in a controlled environment
Yep.
to exclude cooking the books. Yes.
I actually like this point because the point that you're bringing up about the rigorous uh, attitude of the study within a scholastic environment, that's actually the entire history of theology, right?
Hmm.
For basically all of human history, the majority of all of the smartest people who have ever lived have like mostly unanimously, while studying the data, come to a conclusion that God exists. And now in our modern day and age, there's uh, more disagreement on that topic. But if you go back and look at like any scientists from the development of science, all of those people were theists, and they were using deductive methods to come to the knowledge that they arrived at. Right
Well,
when
that's philosophy. That's not a hard science, right? Philosophy uses deduction. I don't accept philosophy
Do you
as
accept math and
evidence
logic?
to wait, hold up. I don't accept philosophy
Hmm.
as evidence of science. The actual nature, the purpose, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big philosophy fan, right? But it's actually its purpose is to point us in directions that we should search,
Hmm.
right? And then that's where science takes over, right?
so I would
So
actually
philosophy, so by deduction is philosophy. The method of deduction is
Hmm.
literally philosophy.
Yeah, and deduction is also the primary method used in like mathematics, right? The only way that we know anything in mathematics is by deduction. I would actually argue that the uh, grounding for which scientific methods are valid and which work in a uh, empirical context is actually a philosophical discussion, right? The philosophy of science is its own large field, and trying to decide which scientific methods are count as empirical research methods, that's actually a philosophy in and of itself.
And to be clear, we're not up here saying Zach
Yeah,
and I are
by
not saying that.
definition,
Well,
it's not, but okay.
Zach and I are not saying that God is true or God is real. That is not the statement being made here. What we are saying is that to come to the conclusion that God exists is a rational conclusion, one that can be grounded on logic and reason. And just like how in the scientific community, something can be grounded in logic, reason, and have that rigor, is still has disagreements and still have people coming to different conclusions, and those two different conclusions are both arrived at via rational means. The God conclusion is also a
I'm
rational.
saying what comes. Wait a minute. Can you go backwards for a second? I want to understand
Hmm.
your statement better.
Yeah, so
Okay. What comes? Well, let me ask a question. It's like answering it. I didn't even ask the question yet. So, what do you mean by coming? Can you specify coming to different conclusions? Are
Yeah,
you, are
like
you
I
referring to
meant.
science?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, you have different scientists who believe that the universe had an infinite eternal past. You also have scientists who believe that the universe had a beginning. You also have scientists who believe that there's a multiverse. You also have scientists who believe in a infinite repeating big bounds. You have scientists who believe in a heat death where stars will cease to exist, but the universe itself will continue to exist. You have all of these different models interpreting the same data that come to different conclusions.
Yeah, okay, so wait, so let's stop. Let's stop. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So, most of which, and you went very fast, okay? So we'd have to go one by one and look it up, okay? Are not, in fact, yet scientific models. They are hypothesis ideas that are being studied and researched, right? So once something becomes an accepted scientific model, right? Like multiverse, it is not an agreed upon scientific model yet, right? So that is important of what is in hypothesis stage,
Well,
what is
there
being studied, and what is an accepted, peer-reviewed, globally accepted scientific model. Do you understand what I mean when I say those
so
terms?
this is
Or how I'm
what's
using
being this is what it's
them?
saying. While the standard
So
modern cosmological model is the Friedman, Lemaitre, Robertson, Walker model based on the Big Bang, there is no single universally agreed upon number of theoretical models. Instead, scientists use several variations, open, flat, closed, and explore alternatives, including cyclic models and the multiverse theory. So these, so a what you're talking about,
What were
like
you
I
just
understand what you're
reading from,
talking
my
about.
friend? Wait, hold up. Wait, hit the brakes. What were you just reading from?
I was reading from Google, and what
Oh,
I
you're
was
reading from Google. You're
was
reading from Google. Google and Wikipedia, to me, from my standard, is not a source, it's a search engine,
mhm.
right? So an actual source on that, yeah, you're just, so I would need a source on that.
Well, you're the one that has presented the claim that what I described are not actually scientific models, but the terminology from what I've experienced is that those are how those are described is that they are described as the like it said, the cyclical model of the universe. And so
Okay,
you would need to show that no, these are not models. But the main point that I was making is you have scientists who hold to one or the other as true, and they teach it. Now, they don't say that they don't teach it as a settled question, like, say,
correct.
the
So
theory
this
of
is where I
evolution.
think maybe you don't, yeah, so this is what I presented, okay? Until something, and this is why maybe you don't understand the term or how I'm using it, of what an agreed upon scientific model is,
I
right?
never said that these were
So
agreed upon. That was my very point, is that these are not agreed upon models, but these are
that is
positions
what,
held in the scientific community that are
so this,
rational, even if
yeah, he
not
doesn't
settled.
understand.
So the
Yeah.
point that I was getting at is something can be an unsettled question.
Right. So this is what yeah, he doesn't understand what a scientific
well,
model
so
is.
here, I'll make
Okay.
let me interject a little bit because I don't want I don't want you guys to talk over each other. I've worked in a nuclear laboratory for the past 6 years. I work with chemistry and physics science on a daily basis. I just left that job, but that's what I've done for the past 6 years. And so, have you ever heard of the Kaluza-Klein theory in physics, man?
No, I'd have to research that.
So what Kaluza-Klein basically
So,
is
so
it's
wait, hold
a
up,
unifying.
guys. Do you understand, before you go down these rabbit holes, do you understand what a scientific model is? I'm
Uh,
asking the host.
yeah,
Okay.
I was just trying to explain one
Because
scientific
something is
model.
being studied and researched and investigated does not make it a scientific model.
an abstract model does not have to be inductively proven. It just has to be an abstract model that works with the mathematics within the field. So if I go back to the
I
example that I
didn't
was
say
giving,
abstract. I said an accepted scientific model.
there are
If your
very
background,
few accepted
if your
scientific models.
background, if your background is what it is, then you understand the language that I am using.
I was trying to present the Kaluza-Klein theory is a model which unifies the electromagnetic force and the gravitational force by using higher dimensional geometry. It hasn't been proven inductively yet, but it is a coherent rational model for how you could unify these two physics forces. Physicists are searching for.
It is not an accepted scientific model.
So basically, your argument then is that it's only rational to believe in accepted scientific models. It has to have those premises in order for it to be rational to believe, correct?
That is the standard that I follow, that I require, based on my background.
So
Again,
when Einstein,
there are many scientific theories, hypotheses, hypotheses that are being explored. Okay, when it reaches a level of a globally accepted, peer-reviewed scientific model is when science then builds upon that existing model. Because an idea is being built, a theory is being built, does not make it an accepted, peer-reviewed scientific model.
yeah. So I think in your belief system, it was irrational for Einstein to come up with his theory of general relativity because it was not an accepted model then, right? Because you're saying it has to be globally accepted. Well, when Einstein was developing general relativity, it wasn't an accepted framework. He developed it deductively. And until everybody got on board, actually, Einstein was just being irrational.
Yeah, that's not what I said.
But that's analogous to what you were saying.
No, you added a lot on to what I actually said.
You said
okay.
It has to be globally accepted for it to be rational.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't say that, my friend. I don't know why you know. No one on this panel heard me say that.
That's what I heard.
I mean, that's what I heard.
That's what you inferred, but I did not. You did not hear me say that. You can play the tape back.
I mean,
So at what point does an abstract model like Kaluza-Klein or general relativity or any abstract model we want to look at what point does that abstract model go from being irrational to rational?
Okay, so I never said it was rational or irrational. What I did say is, from my standpoint, it needs to be a peer-reviewed, globally accepted science.
Look at scientifically accepted models that espouse social Darwinism and racism, but I wouldn't agree that those are good things, even if they were globally accepted. I wouldn't even call them rational things.
Yeah, you're not tracking. So hey guys, yeah, so I'm gonna log out. You guys are entertaining. Peace out.
yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, have a good one. That got a little bit spicy at the end. It's still fun though.
Yep. Think it was like even Lizzie in the comments was like, no, that's not what belief is, that's faith. But yeah, it was, I think that's where it was, is equivocated belief and faith, and was struggling with separating that.
Yeah, because there certainly are things. There are things that are belief based that are irrational, right? And I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that, right? If I just started saying, if I said I believe the Earth is flat, then that's certainly an irrational belief, right?
Yep.
There's no evidence to support that. But the fact of the matter is there is long-standing scholastic traditions which attempt to come at the question of God's existence, even if we can't come at that problem inductively. We can use deductive methods to try and see, does it make sense, does it not? I think there are some interesting things to be said, but yeah.
But yeah, like in the whole point that I think you and I are trying to make, like I was saying, is like we're not trying to at this point in time definitively say that God exists. Um, that's not a conversation that I
Yeah.
think is going to have uh, a good outcome in this type of format. But I think the
Yeah, and
conversation,
I'm not even trying to argue that atheism is irrational, because that's not what I
yep,
believe. I don't
yep,
think that atheism is an irrational stance to hold, but I think that when you come at the question and you're discounting an entire worldview by saying people are irrational, well, it's kind of like, it kind of is a bit of a tell as to sort of your life philosophy and the way you see the world. Like they're playing higher value on this life and being
yeah,
born over.
yeah. So the thing is that like that sounds very close to like a Gnostic belief, the idea of like this life is evil, matter is evil, etc. And I disagree with that. And the thing is, the reason that I don't support abortion bans per se is I don't think that's the right way to go about to getting rid of abortions in this country. Um, it we need to first go through and change the hearts of the people so that way then it becomes unthinkable and we don't even need to worry about the laws. I think that's the way that we need to go about it. And the thing with you know like I wouldn't call pro-lifers worshipers of the flesh. Like God created everything, including this life. And at the end of all of creation, he said, he looked upon all of his creation and said, it is good. So this life is good. Like, I know the argument is like, heaven's better than this life, but that doesn't make this life evil. So.
Yeah, and I think pro-lifers just might not be taking the question to its logical extremes. The thing is, like, a pro-choice position, in my opinion, is pretty logically self-evident if you consider like if you just draw parallels to when when killing is, you can kill someone in self-defense, right? And as where the growth of the baby will terminate the mother's life, like, the mother has a legal right to self-defense to save her own life.
Yep.
As for other situations, there's more discussion to be had there, but at least in the occasion of self-defense, it's pretty self-evident that mothers have the right of self-defense, even if the person they're defending themselves from happens to be their children.
Yep. But yeah, I wouldn't call it the worship of the flesh. But it looks like we got another request. Let's see. Oh, there we go.
I was wondering.
Oh, there we go. Welcome.
to be here. I was curious if you're using the word rational with the definition that I generally use it. I define the word rational as with. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how do you tend to use it?
Sorry, go on.
The definition of rational, generally the way I use it, means with reason.
Mm-hmm.
How are you using it?
Reason
Is that the
based.
definition you have for it?
Yeah, or it's at least close enough to it. Yeah, like the way that I understand rational is someone or like someone acting using reason, or someone or a belief formed by reason and evidence.
So you are using it as
Yeah.
being with reason.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Well, I don't have reason to believe the God of Abraham is a true God. Do you? Can you have a reason that would convince me?
Well, that's fine. So, moreover, our point isn't necessarily, we're not trying to show the historical certainty of the God of Abraham, right? We're just saying that if you believe that the universe of Abraham, and that the historical accuracy of Christianity is the beyond a shadow of a doubt, and it should convince any rational person. We're just saying to believe that the universe was created by some higher divinity is a rational position to hold.
Okay. I don't know that reason. Share it with me.
Yeah. So
Sure.
there's several ways that you can go
You can go
about
on.
it. Yeah, so there's several ways that you can go about it. And another aspect of something being rational is um, it doesn't necessarily have to be shown beyond a shadow of a doubt to be true. Like it just needs to be reason based. Um, so, and
Right.
if I
That's
could
what
look,
I'm waiting on. The
yeah.
reason.
And so you have, so actually, let me go ahead and bring up what we were kind of working on near the start of the live.
Well,
And we can.
what's that got to do with you sharing the reason with me?
Yes, sure. I can just do a quick argument
Mhm.
from causality. I'm not saying I necessarily believe this, but if you look and say that there are, uh, uh, if you were to look and say that there were all of these causes in the universe, there's causality and actuality, it would stand to reason that all causes extend from some first cause, and that is a reason that you can apply in this case.
Uh,
So why would
did,
that reasoning be irrational?
did you share a reason with me for me to believe? I didn't understand it. If you did, try
Oh,
one more
we're not
time.
trying to get you to believe. Like
Well,
that's not our purpose.
I won't. I want to. We did agree that rational means belief in God is with reason, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. There, like I
Okay,
said,
I want that reason so I can believe with you guys.
Oh, someone can show you a reason for something and it still not be enough to convince you to believe in it. Like,
the argument that I was trying to make, that I might have said it too quickly. We can still share an argument
mhm.
from causality. So, right, if you look around, there are causes, and there's potential and there's causes. Right, everything is either contingent or well, I guess we can say necessary. That there's something that came before every action, right? If you see a candle in it, hold on, let me put my
If
dog
there's
up. If you just want to continue with the argument,
Yeah.
though.
But yeah, so before we get too deep into it, like what I want to make sure is understood is we are not claiming that once you see the reason you will believe. Like Would you agree that it is
If it's a
reasonable?
good reason, I promise I will.
Yeah, but
Yeah, if you got a good reason, I promise I.
that's fine.
You
Like
know,
I'm just trying. What we're trying to counter is the claim that a lot of people make that theists are stupid, irrational, and don't know what they're talking about. That's mostly what we're trying to argue against. Um, but what
well,
Zach was arguing is you have causes and
the
effects.
prompt says the prompt is making a claim.
Well,
Yeah. So we can keep going with it. So since we notice that there is cause and effect, there either has to be an infinite regress of causes, or there has to be a first cause. Can you agree with that?
Right, pick one and give me a reason. I
Yeah.
won't argue either way. I just want the reason.
Yeah. And so the majority of scholastic thinkers for most of history have concluded that the principle of first cause was sufficiently reasonable for them and for their purposes. If you look at some of the greatest physics, greatest scientists throughout all of time, the father of quantum mechanics, Heisenberg, you had the greatest mathematicians of all time, Euler, Gauss, they all concluded that the idea that existence springing from some first cause, from a deity, was reasonable to them. And so, for me at least, the fact that all of these super geniuses throughout time have concluded that God is rational is actually a rational argument for why I should believe.
In other words, I should be asking those guys for a reason instead of asking you guys. In other
Well, I
words,
mean,
you guys assume they have a reason. You don't know it. You can't share it with me, but you feel like that they're in a position. They have really expanded understanding and
so
a connection that I don't have. But I can accept it without knowing their reason. I should accept this belief.
no,
no.
I
So
told you the reason. The argument from first cause. So if it's either the case that the universe has a creator or has an infinite regress as two like potential options. And so that right there gives you two reasonable options. And then the additional reasons for why you should choose them, well, you could make a cosmological argument, you could make a transcendental argument, you could make an ontological argument. There are a ton of different arguments to look at. We could start getting into them with you if you want. But to say that there is no reason.
I'm not interested in arguing. I just want the reason.
well, that's what arguments are. It is using reason to start from something that we
No,
do
no,
know.
no, no, no. No. I'm not interested. Argument. If you share the reason with me,
Well, no, so
I
no,
want you
so
to share the reason.
that
So
that
it
it,
seems
that
like,
I will tell you what the reason was always given to me.
go ahead.
sure, go on.
I was told that I needed to have faith, that there really wasn't a reason. I have to have faith. That's what
So
I was,
that's not
and I
a
had faith.
so that's not reason. That's not using reason or logic. So reason and logic and you being rational is taking a premise or a proposition, which is you need to have faith. That's a proposition. And then applying other propositions and the laws of logic to it to arrive at a conclusion. And using prepositions in a logical structure and using reason with those multiple propositions is called an argument, such as all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. That is an argument, a rational argument, because it doesn't violate the laws of logic. And that's what an argument is. It is applying reason and rationality to different propositions and connecting those propositions together to arrive at new information.
Right, I understand the mechanics. I'm waiting for the reason.
So I
Well,
think
that's what
I think
when
what
we
you're
said
coming
let us
down
give
to
you
is
the
that
argument,
it's
you
like,
said you didn't want the
My,
argument, you want the
what about
reason, but the argument is the reason.
the argument is the reason? No, no. There can be.
Then you're not
You
using
can give
rational
me
the same way that
you
we are.
you can give me a reason, and if it's a true reason, I will accept it. If it's not, I will
How do you
argue that
know
it's
a statement is true?
by verification.
Okay, and how do you verify it?
Through How do you verify it?
Yeah.
You look for evidence.
And how do you apply evidence to an abstract statement like a googolplex plus times 1 is a googolplex?
Well, I have no idea what you said. So,
A googolplex is a number. It is one of the largest numbers that we have. So how do you know what a googolplex times 1 is? What's
well,
the
you
evidence?
don't. You
We
don't,
do.
and
A
you should.
googolplex
And
times 1 is a googolplex.
Google
Because any,
times two is two Googleplexes, right?
yeah,
Okay. Well, what does that got to do with what we're talking about?
because you said evidence, but where was the
Right.
evidence that you used to arrive at that true conclusion?
Well, that's the same evidence I use. It's saying I have two cars. I count them. I count the Googleplexes. There's two of them. So
You
there's
Well,
just,
two.
you can't count to a googolplex. A googolplex
yeah,
is there's a googolplex is larger than the number of atoms in the universe.
Well,
Like
we don't
it is
tell you.
impossible to count to a googolplex.
Right. It's impossible to divide something until it can't be divided anymore. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
It does because you said we know a statement is true by evidence, and so I was asking,
Right.
well, how do you apply evidence to something that is abstract that doesn't have evidence for it?
Well, you don't. When you don't have evidence, you're supposed to say, "Well, I don't know. We're looking for an
Then
answer."
why did you say that a googolplex times 2 is 2 googolplex? Because you
well,
can't
that's
count
not
that.
the case, right? I have a
Well, you're acting like Googleplex is the top number.
It's
There
the
is no
largest
top
number
number.
that we have named.
We
well,
that we have
we
named.
can extend
We,
this
you and
argument
I,
with
you
higher
can,
math, right?
you
So
and I can put a label on two Googleplexes. We can call it Joggleplex.
well,
Sure.
in any
So
case, we
now
can
we have named a number bigger than one
Hmm.
Googleplex. We have
Yeah.
named it Goggleplex.
well,
It's
in
just
any
a
case,
label.
we can understand that higher mathematics, right? We can discover things about higher mathematics without being able to physically show them, right? We can calculate an infinitely increasing number of digits of pi, even though we can never see all of the digits of pi in nature, right? Why is it the case that there is the number of digits within pi is infinite and non-repeating? Well, it's proven to be the case with mathematical analysis. You can take a real analysis class, you can take some calculus classes, and you can show that pi is an irrational number.
Hmm.
But it seems to be the case that you can only do so deductively. You cannot show that pi is irrational inductively. You cannot go look at pi in nature and say, like, oh yeah, this is what the next digit of pi is going to be. No, you have to use your brain and come up with the next digit deductively.
I have a friend who's a Muslim. His name is Hakim. And if I ask him for a reason, how would you guys like to listen to him go through all this with me instead of giving me a reason why I should respect Allah?
I mean, that's fine. Like the whole, we're not saying, hey, you have to be a particular
He's
religious
probably going to give you
group.
a contextual narrative of how it's affected him, how it's
If he don't have a with reason for me to believe it, then I'm going to say, sorry, Hakim, I'm waiting for a reason to believe. As soon as I have a reason to believe something is true, I accept it as true.
reasons why someone should be a Democrat than just saying, oh, Social Security. Because, like, say I'm a young person, I don't benefit from Social Security. It actually makes my taxes worse. If it was just the case of Social Security, then maybe I would be like, oh, I don't want to be a Democrat. But there's a more rich contextual reason why someone should be a Democrat than just Social Security, right?
No, there's a list of reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's the same thing for why the belief in God is rational, right? There's a list of reasons. That's kind of what we're trying to get the point across.
Okay, what is the first one? I gave you a first one. You should give me the first one.
Yep, the cosmological reason. And actually, if you want to just go experiential, then sure, I'll give you an experiential reason. In my life, belief in God has done a lot for me and my family. So there's a reason.
No, that's not a reason.
That is a reason.
No.
Why is that not a reason?
Well, it's not a sufficient reason to believe Hakim when he says Allah has made these changes in my life. I'm going to look at Hakim and say, Hakim, that's no better than my friends that have their, they say that Zeus or Venus or the God of Abraham or Hinduism changed their life. That's not a reason. That's a claim.
Sufficient reason to expect
that's a claim.
That's sufficient reason to expect some sort of divinity should exist, right? The fact that so many different religions have tried to reason towards God is an argument itself. That the fact that, like, as all societies have sprung forth throughout time and history, basically all of them have come up with their own ideas of God. The absolute fact that there are so many societies coming up with theories of God seems to reason that there is some rational idea of God out there.
Do you think my friend Hakim has reasons to convince you, or do you think he will only have claims?
He probably does have reasons to convince me. He probably has a rational basis for why he believes what he believes. I wouldn't assume that your friend Hakim is irrational.
Yep.
You wouldn't?
Yeah, you can be rational and have a false belief.
What about my friend who believes in Zeus or Thor?
Yeah, there are rational positions.
Like someone can have a rational reason and hold a false belief. Just because someone is rational and has rational reasons for a belief doesn't mean that the belief is true.
Then they got a false reason.
No, reason doesn't tell you anything about truth.
What?
Reason does not tell you anything about truth. It just
it does.
So what is the difference between? So what is the difference between a valid argument and a sound argument?
One of them has truth.
Valid arguments can have truth.
Yeah, so
that's what I'm saying. Valid ones, invalid ones don't.
No,
the point that he's making here is that you can have a valid logical structure, right? Logic is a language, and so there are logical fallacies, but there are things that fit within a reasonable logical structure that can be true, but that doesn't verify the truth value of their propositions within the logic structure.
And you also can have an invalid argument to a true statement. You can also have a valid system to a true or an invalid structure to a true belief. Like all valid and rational is showing is if there wasn't a mistake done in arriving to the conclusion. Now, just because there wasn't a mistake done doesn't
mean
that
I'll give you an example of this. This is a... Yeah, sorry. I was just going to give you an example of this. Mm-hmm. So this is a valid logical statement that the logic is valid, but it's clear that the propositions themselves are not valid. So if the moon is made of cheese, then I am a flat earther. The moon is not made of cheese, therefore I am not a flat earther. That is logically valid as far as logic forms go. But obviously the propositions are silly.
No, it's not logic.
No, that is a valid logical format. Like if
Absolutely not.
That is.
What's the fallacy that was committed?
What's logical about saying the moon is made out of cheese? What's logical about that?
That's a false statement.
I said
it's a claim. If I say the moon is made out of whipped cream, it's a claim.
Mm-hmm.
It is not logic. If I tell you the moon made out of whipped cream, I'm making a claim. There is no reason to call. There is no reason. It would to be
So
logic.
it
It would
sounds
have to
like
have
then,
reason.
Papa Drew, it sounds like then Zach and I are not using rational and logic and reason in the same way that you are. So
Right. You're not. You're including faith.
No,
We're
I'm
including the
using.
substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. You've got
I
to
mean,
step out on
we haven't even brought up
faith.
faith at all. But what
I,
I'm
I
saying
didn't
is
say
that
you did. I'm telling
y-
you that you're using it.
well, we're not using it either. But the point that I was
Well,
getting at,
sure.
Papa Drew, is
Is my
that
friend Hakim using it?
Papa Drew, the point that I was making is that we were talking about how Socrates, or all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, is rational, is an example of rational, and it's an argument, and you disagreed.
No, no, no,
Because
no,
of
no,
that,
no, no. I did
because
not.
of
No, I
that,
didn't disagree. I disagree with the one about the moon being cheese.
well, no, no,
Well,
no, no.
then
You
you're just
disagreed.
disagreeing with mathematical and philosophical logic that's taught in a college level course, because that's a clear example of where the logic form is accurate, but the
Hmm.
propositions are inaccurate. This is like textbook level college logic.
Yeah, and you were saying that that's not, that arguments aren't an example of a reason. And I was using that to show you that no, reason is when you make an argument to arrive at a conclusion. And when I used that Socrates' mortal example, you disagree that that was an example of reason. So because of that, I don't know how, like, because we're not using rational in the same way that you are, then
Oh, okay. Now, is that true? We're not using the word rational the same?
it seems like
Well,
it
it seems like
because
we're using it to
Y'all do agree that
describe.
words don't have an intrinsic meaning, right?
they haven't agreed
I
upon meaning and we're using
No,
it
no, no,
in
no, no,
the,
no, no, no. No words do not have an agreed upon meaning. They
then
have
what are
agreed upon
dictionaries?
usage. They are a list of usages.
What's
When
a
you look
usage
up
of a
a
word? Its meaning.
I
when
don't even know what you mean to say words don't have intrinsic meanings, or words have intrinsic meanings. Are you like
He's
espousing
trying to
that
say
there's a
that, like,
platonic space of?
basically that
I'm
words have an
saying, if
objective thing.
I can use a word and you two guys can define it differently. That
So
means
there,
it has usage. It don't have an intrinsic meaning. The term intrinsic means it stays with it, goes with it. I can walk in one room right now where my sister is and use the word dear, and I can walk in another room where my brother-in-law is and use the word dear. And I will be using them in two different ways,
Hmm.
which proves they don't have meaning. They have usage. They don't have a meaning that goes from the bedroom to the den. So if sometimes people will disagree for 20 minutes before they find out that they're using a word two different ways. That's why I wanted to start this conversation, making sure that we're using the word rational in the same way. Because I believe if I go open the dictionary, which I'm willing to go find one, and look up the word rational, I believe I will find different usages. I don't think I will find a single meaning.
yeah. So we're just using rational and the like classic academic logical sense of the term, and I
The
guess you're
most
using,
pop would
and I
see that.
guess you're using rational in like
Am,
a
am
different
I
way.
am I correct in saying the dictionary gives you first the most popular usage, second the second most popular usage, third the third most popular usage? Am I correct in stating that?
I honestly, I'm kind of losing you a little bit. I don't know where you're going with this argument.
Well,
And I've
I'm
also got
I'm
to
I'm, I'm
start getting
expressing to
ready
you
for work.
that words don't have intrinsic
Papa Drew,
meaning; they have usages.
Papa Drew, I got to finish up
Uh huh.
here because I got to head off to
Okay.
work.
All
It was
right.
great having you
Thanks,
up.
guys. See you next time.
Yep.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right. Yeah. But yeah, I do have to start getting ready for work. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for coming on, Zach.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
All right.
Well, y'all enjoy the rest of your week. I'm gonna try to be doing this somewhat regularly. I think I finally figured out a schedule where I can squeeze it in for about 2 hours, you know, uh, 9 to 11, and get this on a somewhat regular basis.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, see you later.
See ya.